We're going to hear about the year that was and what to expect in 2023 with Managing Director Chris Burrell. Now, Chris writes a monthly blog for his clients, and in November he talked about the overvaluation of US stocks and what it means for a recessionary environment here in Australia and around the world.
Yes, so we've got a repeat of the dot-com bubble from 2000. And so far the NASDAQ, which is the technology stocks, have fallen 30% since November 12 months ago. And the Dow Jones, which are the quality stocks, have fallen about 20%. On average, the equities portfolios, i.e. the Australian shares, did about 7.5%. The index, which is the S&P ASX 200 accumulation index, was off 1.5%. So that's a long way above the US numbers. Well, the central banks are looking for inflation targets of 2%, which they've had for a long while, and the current inflation rate is 6% plus around the world. So what they're doing is increasing interest rates to try and bring that inflation down. Inflation's got two components. It's got the non-core component, which has been coming down for some time, and that's things like fruit and vegetables, energy prices, freight costs. And the central banks don't think they can control those, and they can't. What they are concerned about is the core inflation numbers, and they are more stubborn, and in particular housing is in there. So housing is 40% of the US core inflation number, and just numbers out in the last 24 hours, that has still gone up, just a small amount. And so they're going to wait for some time until they get the data to see that the core inflation numbers are coming down. Well, I think the consensus is that nobody really knows. The history of interest rate increases is that they usually lead to recessions. So before Christmas, the central view was that there would be a recession in the US, a mild recession probably, maybe a bit more in the EU because of the Eurocentric events that are going on. Australia is interesting. We've been a beneficiary of the terrible events in Ukraine so far because we tend to compete with supplying commodities, not just minerals, but wheat and so on around the world. And so the Australian economy has been somewhat protected from some of the events overseas. And the Treasury, Australian Treasury, is saying they actually expect our GDP, our gross domestic product, to go up by 1.5% this year. So the central case is that we will chug along underneath, that most of the pain will be overseas. Well, traditionally in quieter periods, the defensive stocks do better. Gold, health, telcos and utilities. The ones that tend to be more at risk are cyclicals, like banks and financials. So that would be the standard answer. What we would say, of course, is that, well, those sector directions are interesting, but ultimately you've got to look at the businesses in each of the sectors. So, for example, Coles and Woolies have been strongly supported post-COVID because everyone was going to the supermarkets. And whereas normally you'd say, let's jump in there, it really becomes a price question. Are those stocks good value at the moment, or do we wait to see if they come back a bit further? We've had the view that we should carry more cash going into this year, that there will likely be periods of volatility given the uncertainty around the world, and therefore we thought to have 10 to 20% in cash made some sense going into this year. We are quietly hopeful that the outcomes will be better than some of the more negative scenarios that have been painted, and we think we will get opportunities at different times to buy good businesses this year at good prices.
Okay.
Look, I think most people are fine. The unemployment is still very, very low, which is another reason why it's difficult to see us having a severe recession at this stage. And so most people are in jobs, they've got pay packets. Yes, if they've got mortgages, the costs of those mortgages is going up. It's really that 5 to 10% of people who have bought properties in the last 1 to 2 years at what's going to be the top of the cycle, and have borrowed a lot of money, and those people are the ones that will feel the pinch and may need support from parents or whoever to get through the next cycle.